Hey everyone, it's a really rough winter and I'm very behind on YouTube videos I wanted to make and therefore finish. So I'm just gonna today do an on the spot review of Pluto because this anime honestly meant quite a lot to me. Also, the timing's good because I just finished the show last night, and also this Saturday, November 4th, was Osamu Tezuka's birthday. I've met Tezuka's son Makoto once, and I need to remind myself that I need to eventually track down and watch his film adaptation of Barbara, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, back to Pluto. Pluto finally came out this year after 10 hellish, awful years of waiting for it. No, wait, maybe it's 13 years because I've been waiting since like 2011 or so. Anyway, my best friend had gotten me into the manga about 10 years ago, and then I was on a big Urasawa kick at the time. I just finished watching Monster, it had aired in the US, and I managed to get my hands on some DVDs of the live action adaptations of 20th Century Boys. If you're a fan of Urasawa, you should definitely watch the second movie. The trilogy as a whole is alright, but the first movie is very slow and the third one is very strange, and I think the second one is just the most balanced and best movie of the trilogy, so that's the one you can really enjoy on its own merits, and it's the best film as a standalone film in its own right. But anyway, back to Pluto. So yeah, in 2010, I read the first chapter of the manga pretty much right when it came out because it came out and like the internet lost its shit about it. I knew instantly that this manga was just like a pure, absolute masterpiece. And I've never been really much of a manga collector, so even though I read and bought the first chapter, I knew I wouldn't finish it, and I decided that I would gleefully wait for the anime adaptation. Now, I thought because this series was so well acclaimed and covered such a popular topic as Astro Boy, that it was sure to be adapted almost immediately, but unfortunately it was not. There were so many problems with adapting it. At a certain point, I didn't think it would be adapted at all. 8 months ago, I put out another video detailing the absolute production hell this anime went through and my general hopes for it as it was finally released. So check that video out if you want that story. But otherwise, long story short, there was a slight legal conflict with the release of the 2009 Astro Boy movie that basically came out right as this book was being published in its initial run. And then after it was published, Universal Studios, the movie studio, not the one with the roller coasters, they optioned Pluto for a live action adaptation. And they never got around to doing it. It probably would have sucked. It probably would have just been a generalized mess. I have no idea how bungled an American live action adaptation of Pluto would have been, especially made in the mid 2010s when, anime adaptations were of this caliber. Like, I kind of think they probably would have cut out the entire Astro Boy plot and just made it entirely about Gesicht, which I kind of think that defeats the point of the story. But anyway, Pluto finally came out as an anime, as it was meant to be, and I finally saw it, and it was exactly as amazing and as good as I had hoped it would be. Like, so many things were like total hype this year, like Spider-Verse sequel and I don't know, like every single Marvel movie, and they just didn't live up to my expectations, but god damn it, Pluto pretty much lived up to my expectations. Pluto was a massive flex of Urasawa's skill as a writer, his ability as a mangaka, the fact he was able to take the borderline fairy tale-esque chapter of Astro Boy and turn it into a geopolitical serial killer thriller while still featuring all the same characters and all the same events is an absolute astounding masterpiece. Hideo Kojima, the most brilliant video game director in the world, posted this online that after watching the last episode, it truly carries the soul of Tezuka Sensei and Naoki Urasawa's prayer to carry on his legacy. It also shows Mr. Maruyama's love for production and the passionate performances of all the voice actors. Everything has come to fruition, and this is the absolute perfection of anime. And so yeah, I'm at a strange point in my life recently because I've almost completed the first episode of my own anime, and in doing so I've reached kind of a state of enlightenment that I never conceivably thought I would reach. Also, this is going to sound absolutely crazy out of context, and I don't think anyone but me will ever understand this statement, but a mistake I made in 2015 has butterfly affected out of control and has had global consequences and minorly tainted the production of this anime, at least for me. The mistake will be unnoticeable to anyone except me, and I'm feeling almost crazy that I am noticing it. And maybe this mistake will go on to affect other anime in the future, but for now I can only ignore it, and this is the first time I've noticed it, so it's really like chilling me to the core, and it really stings since I was looking so forward to this anime. But ignoring that, this is truly a perfect anime adaptation, and actually more than that, it's strangely a beyond perfect anime adaptation, because literally each episode of the Pluto series, each episode fully adapts the entire volume of Urasawa's manga perfectly. They adapted them as 8 one-hour pseudo-movie length episodes, which is incredible. I've almost never seen that done in anime. The only thing I can compare it to is like Gundam Unicorn, which they later had to split up into smaller episodes, and a few episodes of like the remake of Space Battleship Yamato. But my god, it's incredible. I'm not even sure if Urasawa himself ever expected it would be so faithfully adapted like that, since each volume has kind of an A story and a B story. And I kind of wonder if he did that to structure it more like a 16-episode TV show, but it's an absolute miracle and an absolute testament to Urasawa's skill as a mangaka that they just straight adapted every panel without compromise or addition, and the story flows absolutely perfectly. The adaptation is kind of funny too, since even though it lacks an opening credits, it just has this weird Marvel Studios style opening showing the manga and then leading into a flat title screen. But today I want to discuss the origins of the story, or rather the original story of which this manga is a remake from. And the original story, as we all know, is Astro Boy. Tetsuwan Atom for Japanese people, but I just have to call it Astro Boy because the first time I heard of it, it was Astro Boy. And it's insane how absolutely developed these Astro Boy characters in Pluto. Starting with Gasik, the main character, who in the original Astro Boy story just shows up for like barely 7 pages, barely introduces himself, explains that he's trying to arrest Pluto, and then is like gunned down in a swarm of RoboCop violence. I guess from here on out, I have to warn you guys about spoilers because I have to spoil Pluto to talk about and review it faithfully, and I really especially have to review the last episode and the story as a whole, and so just spoiler alert here if you have not watched Pluto, if you haven't finished watching it, what are you, stupid? This is the greatest anime adaptation of our lives. Go watch it right now, or for fuck's sake, if you don't have Netflix, just buy the book. So, one thing that blew me out of my seat was the fact that Pluto, in the original Astro Boy story, there's this angry Sultan character, and he's like a joke. He's like the Sultan from Aladdin. So in Pluto, they swapped him out with the absolute chilling ghost, the very real post-Iraq War Saddam Hussein. A man who hid in a basement, who hid in a sewer, a man who just vanished from my mind for, God, near 20 years now, a man I haven't considered once since the day he died. And here he is again, and it's funny to see him again. It's funny to consider how prevailing an entity he was in pop culture through the 90s. Like, we used to call him Saddam Insane, because that was funny, haha. But yeah, for all his various war crimes, for all his various murders, Saddam Hussein was eventually publicly tried and hanged in 2006, 4 years before this manga was published, so maybe at the same time that this manga was being written. And so for the time period, this is completely irrelevant. But here he is again, Saddam Hussein, and just seeing this man again, even in this fictional context, committing further atrocities, absolutely chilled me to the core. It's literally the most disturbing I've ever found Saddam Hussein to be in my life, because I never thought I'd see him again. And for all extensive purposes, the man was alive and murdering people when I was a child, but I think I'm more afraid of him now in Pluto than I ever was when he was actually alive, and that's just absolutely strange. The story is insane, the way it remixes these various real-world elements in this almost borderline ancient Astro Boy story, while at the same time preserving the absolute core of what that story was about. On top of the reconstructed versions of the various Astro Boy sub-characters like Uran, who had no personality in the original, and Dr. Tenma, who was just kind of like this weird chaos agent. In the original story, there are these out-of-fashion, old-style joke characters, but suddenly, in Pluto, they're remarkably human again. They're remarkably modernized. And hell, even all of the world's strongest robots in the original story are basically just treated as like filler garbage for Pluto to blow through and show how strong he is. But in Pluto, each one of their deaths is treated as a national tragedy. Everyone senses how loved they were. Everyone senses how famous they were. And Pluto's crimes had these intense consequences of not causing terrorism, but of rather causing global sadness, which is something I've never seen treated in such a way in fiction, or hell, something I've never really seen in real life. I mean, borderline like what's going on right now with like Matthew Perry dying is like comparable, but he wasn't murdered, so it's like on a whole nother level. Like historically, I can like barely like compare this in my mind to the way people talk about how JFK died, but my God, I've never seen that put to the page before. And then Dr. Tenma. Dr. Tenma was so chilling in Pluto. And I've seen a lot of bad versions of Dr. Tenma. Hell, Nicolas Cage played a weird Dr. Tenma once. But this Dr. Tenma was insane. Was he played by Keith David? He sounded so much like Keith David in the dub. But he lived up to exactly what I was expecting of how Naoki Urasawa would treat Dr. Tenma. Naoki Urasawa has always had intense respect for Dr. Tenma because the main character of his previous manga series, Monster, was also named Dr. Tenma as some weird convoluted joke. Almost like he was secretly wishing that he could write the real Dr. Tenma all along, and now here he finally does it. The scenes with Dr. Tenma show the great weight of this brilliant and powerful man who lost his son and then after the fact seemingly lost all sense of morality and just like went around like causing chaos. And oh shit, I forgot, he even wore Blackjack in there. It's a quick cameo and you'll miss it if you don't know who Blackjack is. But in the backstory of North Number 2 in the first episode, that was absolutely amazing as a fan of Blackjack because you can reverse engineer this whole interaction, this whole casual just like put down of Blackjack was there to like reverse engineer in your head this average Blackjack story where Blackjack extorted the mafia to save the life of this random blind kid. And it's a typical Chad Blackjack power play, but it had these like century of repercussions for how people died because of Blackjack's selfishness, how people were permanently scarred because Blackjack himself is such a fucked up and twisted character. Such a perfect adaptation, a bit of a mess, but the way Urasawa like played out all these corrupted characters, the corrupted identities of Pluto and the twisted robot scientist who became crazier and more complicated as the story went on, absolute masterclass storytelling. I will say that in the last episode, it was a bit twisted that it went into a random rage vent on America a little bit with the whole like throw out of, oh, the United States of Thracia. Turns out that's actually the United States of America. They have a Florida, they have a Seattle. And yeah, on top of that, they have an American president who, by all accounts, was seemingly George Bush in the way it was written, but he kind of resembles Donald Trump, especially in the anime adaptation, which was kind of funny. But yeah, so at the end of the story, for some reason, there's this like crazy, weird AI teddy bear like secretly controlling the American government. Is the secret AI teddy bear the deep state, I guess? Anyway, it was creepy, but yeah, all of a sudden, the German robot serial killer escaped his cave, somehow snuck into the White House, and with his one arm almost strangled to death the American president. Very cool dramatically, but logistically a nightmare, especially the more you think about it. He did ask Dr. Tenma to fix him, so maybe Dr. Tenma did actually fix him because Dr. Tenma is just a pure chaos agent. That can actually explain how the scene is going down, but otherwise that was a head scratcher. And yeah, the last episode was probably the most interesting episode for me on multiple levels because there were so many crazy things going on in the last episode. Mainly the finishing out of Gesik's art, clarifying why he killed a human being, why he killed Adolf's brother, and then the way it steered the story back into classic Astro Boy, slowly at first, but then in the last couple of minutes, it literally became Astro Boy, funneling down the ultra complicated narrative of Pluto and Bora and Astro Boy, and at the same time weaving the super complicated structure of Pluto back into the original Astro Boy episode it all sprouted out of. And this is funny, and I'm not sure if I can ever do this again, but I have one favorite second of Pluto, and that is this cut right here, a few minutes into the final battle in the final episode, where Adam and Pluto finally fight. And I think it's an animator joke. I think it's something that only I can see as an animator, and I think it's something the other animators threw in as a joke to, communicate between the animators. I can see this because I've been animating myself, and it's kind of sharpened my eyes, and there's this one small cut, this 1 second, where because the camera is far enough away, in this 1 second of Pluto, they didn't draw Adam, the boy from Urasawa's manga. they draw Astro Boy. This is Astro Boy. Good old-fashioned original recipe Astro Boy. I mean, he's wearing more clothes, but this 1 second ends up being my favorite second of Pluto because it reminds me that deep down on the inside, despite everything Urasawa changed, rewrote, or improved, at the beating heart of the story, there's still Astro Boy. You just have to look hard enough and pay attention hard enough. I will say there's one thing Urasawa didn't change at all, and that's the last few seconds of the story where Astro finds Pluto's horn as the last remaining piece of him and somberly thinks about all the robots that died and what a tragedy this story was. It's kind of amazing because that means if you do want to continue on from Pluto, you can. It's just you have to continue the rest of the story as just more episodes of Astro Boy. Alright, so that's my take on Pluto. Otherwise, yeah, I loved it. I loved it so hard. It's just something that I don't think we'll ever get again. I am still hoping that now that Pluto has hit as hard as it has, hopefully Netflix will invest in further adaptations of some other Naoki Urasawa stories. 20th Century Boys probably needs an anime adaptation because the movies, like I said, are okay but not perfect. And I've always wanted to check out Billy Bat, so hopefully that gets adapted too. Alright, anyway, what did you guys think of Pluto? Leave a comment, subscribe, and oh yeah, my anime is finally coming out very soon. Check out the trailer if you haven't, because I made an anime, and it's coming out this year. Alright, bye!